And
Okay, hello everyone. So before we start today, let's sing uh, our opening remarks with basmala together, the students. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So today is very special time and session for our lectures. We have Claudia Aravena, Dr. Claudia Aravena. She is the associate professor from Department of Economics, Heriot-Watt University, Edinburgh. So it's very a special time for us to meet her and to hear her sessions concerning the environmental degradations and institutional responses. We are hoping on the next June, May or June, yeah, in between them, you can also meet with Dr. Claudia and personally, yeah, offline, not only online, and we can have a great conversation and discussion with her. So, before starting her class for today, I still remember one of the famous quote from Mahatma Gandhi. What we are doing to the forest of the world is a mirror reflection of what we are doing to ourselves and one and another. So this quotes it's always remind us if you want to be a good person is have to be good behave, giving some love and caring to others, not only to human being, but also for all of the things in the forest, in the animal, in the sea, in everything. So it's really this quote is really reminds us how can we act as personally and how as the collective institutional responses to support the environmental degradations problem. So without any overdue, I would like to invite Dr. Claudia Aravena. Hello, Dr. Claudia.
Okay, now it's on mute. Hello, everybody. Nice to see all of you here. And as Dia was saying, yes, I hope to be there by the end of May and June in Yogyakarta. So hopefully, if you have further concerns or things on the lecture, or you would like to discuss anything, I will be there next month, in a month time, hopefully, so we can meet. And thank
Okay.
you for the introduction, Dia, as well. So I'm going to talk to you today about environmental degradation and institutional responses. So let me put presentation mode. Dia, once I have the presentation mode, I cannot see the chat. So
Okay.
if
Okay.
there is any thing going on the chat, just give me a shout.
Sure. I will be.
Okay. So a bit of what I plan to cover today is let's talk first about what is environmental degradation. So we are all in the same line. Um, uh, Also, we see what types of environmental degradation we have. And what I want to focus a lot is on the role of institutions in environmental degradation and also in the protection of the environment. And then I'm gonna put most of the focus on the policy instruments, because the institutions will have the tools, the policy instruments to deal with the degradation of the environment and to basically protect or bring conservation strategies for the environment. And if we have the time, I just make a very brief touch on the role of environmental evaluation into these policies and how they inform the policies for conservation. So now I would like to start asking you guys, and you could write in your language, or and then Via can help in translate, or you could even put it in English. So either turn on the microphone or put it in the chat. I would like to ask you, what do you understand as environmental degradation? What is for you environmental degradation? Without looking I mean, what is for you if you hear environmental degradation? What that means to you? Let me.
Okay, no fault.
May I, ma'am?
Sure,
Aha.
please.
So I can say that something like devastation of natural livings like trees, mammals, etc., devastated by our activities like illegal logging and something else.
Yeah. Yes, very good. Thank you, Nafa. So that's one way we can see degradation. Any other? What else you can say about what environmental degradation is?
Okay, others? You can use bahasa Indonesia. I can help you to translate. Don't worry. Bisa pakai bahasa Indonesia dan bisa saya translatekan. Silakan.
May I ask something in the beginning of our session? Uh, uh, what if we say, I mean, what if we talk about the definition of environmental degradation into economics sites, like when we or when the maybe some area experience environmental degradation, it turns out the economy of the area cannot work properly. I can uh, like that.
Okay, let's wait. I mean, let's take that question. That is a very relevant question. Let's take that just a bit further in the lecture. That's a quite nice point for discussion, actually, especially in places like Indonesia or places where you have a very good, the economy or has a very good income from natural resources. Okay, no one else
May I,
wants to say anything?
may I try?
Yes?
Please, please.
First of all, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Jamshed Ahmed, and currently I am studying in Universitas Jambi, and I am international student from Pakistan. So,
Mhm.
what I observed in Sumatra Island, like it is facing environmental degradations because of some aspects, like people are doing mining, and Sumatra Island is the main part for growing palm oil. So palm oil, people grow so many palm oil trees, and they ignore forest or some kind of things. And another aspect is mining. So we also call it, like according to the myth, like uh, people said, like Sumatra Island is the golden island of Southeast Asia, because there is like so many natural resources. So people do mining, or there is also one river called it Batang Hari River. So uh, water is so dirty, and appetite and everything is destroyed because people are mining and on the floor of Batang Hari River. So they are. This is also environmental degradation, and also fire. So many times like happening, like in Sumatra Island, people fire the palm oil plantation. So that's it, in my opinion.
Okay, this is actually quite linked to what Naufal was saying before. And now that you are bringing these topics here, I'm gonna probably put in in the lecture one part where we are going to discuss the implications for the economy of environmental degradation. Thank you very much, both of you, for bringing these two points. So let's have a discussion on that once we get to the institutions and to the economy, okay? So yes, and well, thank you for that. So what environmental degradation is the give me a second. Is the deterioration of environment through depletion of resources such as air, water, and soil. As you were saying, you were putting here some examples on forest. You were putting here on other nature. So when we have the depletion of resources, because there is a deterioration, and this deterioration can come from different sources. The example that Hashmi, for example, Nafa were putting here was strictly or directly on economic activities, and that's the first one that we all will have. So by environmental degradation, we have also the destruction of the ecosystems. So it's not just one source, it's the whole ecosystem, because the equilibrium of the ecosystem, if you harm one element, is broken. So the whole ecosystem can be quite affected. Also, the extinction of wildlife. We have seen this in many places. I don't know if you have any example from Indonesia. What I can tell you is examples from Africa, some certain types of elephants, because of the hunting behavior or activity. I can tell you about the case of tortoises and turtles, both tortoises and turtles in the Pacific, specifically the Galapagos Island, where some species have completely disappeared. And this is because of the hunting of them, or the increase of tourism. Then we have pollution. Pollution is another main source of environmental degradation. And again, why pollution comes from all the economic activities, which is not just industry, it's also ourselves, our behavior, our consumer behavior, our activities as well. So these touch commercial, these touch individuals, households, these touch industry. So if we look at this concept of environmental degradation, we see that it really touches the society as a whole and the whole economy. So we have the depletion of resources. If we don't really take into account how we manage in a sustainable way the resources, we are putting in harm a lot of what we need for our future development. So you guys have already advanced on this, what was my next question. So can you mention some examples of environmental degradation? So Naufal and Hamshit, you already put some examples there. So I would like to ask the rest of the course, do you have any other example of environmental degradation you would like to share? Following this definition I just put in here.
Okay, do you have any idea for some examples of environmental degradations? Others? I think everyone is quiet. What happened?
This is not an exam. It is very easy to think on environmental degradation. So there are thousands of examples. So you just need to mention, you don't need to explain, just mention something.
Yeah.
Put it in the chat if you don't want to talk.
Yeah, you can put in the chat. Bisa ditulis di chat, nanti saya translate kan. Okay, Naufal, you are raising your hands. Please open the microphone. Thank you.
Yeah, excuse me, ma'am. I want to ask about the examples of environmental degradation. Mostly, find we find in many references that environmental degradation mostly what how can I say it? Refer to something about natural lives or the lands, but how if we speak examples of environmental degradation in different ways, like human side effects from environmental degradation, like currently there is mental health issue about environmental. Could it be concluded in examples of environmental degradation broadly? Do you have other opinion
Okay.
about this?
Yes, what you are mentioning, no, it won't be in the concept of environmental degradation. That would be part, it is a consequence of environmental degradation, but it's not an environmental degradation. It will come under the health economics part. So it won't be part of, because as the concept says here, is it goes directly, the concept of environmental degradation, it is directly with environmental goods and services. So the health, mental health, and those type of things, it goes more into the health, economics of health, okay? So it's not looked as environmental degradation. It's a consequence of environmental degradation. It creates other, it could be even called as externality of environmental degradation, but it's not environmental degradation itself. So,
Okay.
is that clear?
Yes. Thank you, ma'am, for your explanation.
Okay, so let's look at some examples. And as I said before, it's very easy. I mean, the easiest example is the air pollution. Air pollution is the most common type of pollution we have, and it's the release of harmful pollutants into the air by the industry, by cars, okay, by ourselves, like cooking activities, heating activities, etc. So the most typical type is air pollution, and you guys can see that a lot in Jakarta, for example. We see that a lot in places in India as well, China, where the air pollution levels, the particulate matters are really high. Latin America, places such as Santiago de Chile, Mexico, as well have cities where the air pollution is really high. This type of pollution is harming different elements in the nature. The same happens with water pollution. It's another example of environmental degradation. Water pollution basically is the same, the release of harmful pollutants into the water by the industry and other activities. And this is seen a lot in many places around the world. It is either by releasing a straight contaminated or polluted water, or by all the waste we produce. I have been doing some field works in Java in the last 2 years, and you can see beautiful beaches in the southeast Java, at least beautiful beaches, but they are all covered by sometimes plastic or other types of waste that comes from rivers. The same is a problem in Latin American beaches and many other places in Vietnam. I have seen that a lot. So we have a water pollution, another example of environmental degradation, which causes, as you were saying before, this will cause a lot of other problems in other resources and also in human life. This type of pollution creates health problems, as this one as well, the air pollution, respiratory diseases, water pollution will create a lot of other. Another example that you could mention is the destruction of ecosystems. And ecosystems could be land ecosystem, it could be marine ecosystems. So we see a lot of these ecosystems that have been degraded because of activities. And I'm gonna bring back some of the examples you mentioned. So one of the activities is agriculture, or different types of farming activities, mining as well. They produce a big impact in what is inland ecosystems. The palm oil, also the forestry of pines, also many times degrade the native species. So, and that is the destruction of a native ecosystem that is very difficult to restructure later on. Marine ecosystem is another important point. And I'm just back from before last week from the symposium and the conference of Ocean Decade, which is like the COP but in ocean, where we were talking about and discussing with leaders around the world about the destruction of marine ecosystems and what we can do to protect basically the oceans. We have seen a big increase in what is not just the water pollution in there, but also plastic waste in marine, and they affect just the base and many activities for human. So that's another example. Another example is, and here we start to bring not just the economic activities, because we could relate this previous example mainly to economic activity, to industry, to people, tourism, let's say, our day-by-day activities, forestry, mining. So they are all economic activities. But soil degradation, look at this map here. This shows you the places where we have a very high soil degradation in the world. So there are several places from Central America, a lot of places in Southeast Asia, India, etc. Africa is the only part, North Africa is the only part with a low soil degradation. But in soil degradation, we have part of this is like coming from economic activities, such the badly managed forestry, for example, or agricultural practices. But on the other hand, some soil degradation comes from climate change consequences. So this soil degradation then is related to one thing, natural processes, climate change. However, we can say that this is an indirect effect from our economic activities. And economic activities means everyone against. It's not just industry, it's not just commercial, it's also households and ourselves. So the point here is, in terms of soil degradation, it is important to separate two reasons: the human interventions and economic activities on one side, and the impacts of climate change on this. So, and the question is why we should make this distinction, and consider as well that impacts of climate change can be considered as an indirect effect of economic activities. So why we should actually make this distinction? And let me just go. And the distinction is because institutional responses may be different. Policies should be also approached differently when we apply a policy or we implement policies for tackling environmental degradation. For example, if the problem of the soil degradation comes from a bad managed forestry, then policies should be focused on improving forestry practices. If the soil degradation is coming because of drought, because consequences of climate change, then what we have to do is implement policies that will tackle the different sources of climate change. So the design and implementation of policy is very different. We have the same degradation, we have the degradation of soil, but the source of degradation is different. Therefore, it will have an impact on policy and the decision that institutions do for this. So we need to bear that into account. So let's bring now institutions into this picture. So what is the role of institution in environmental degradation? This role should be multifaceted. Institution, first of all, what includes institutions? And I'm going to talk here about institutions including governments, international organizations, regulatory agencies, NGOs, community-based organizations. All these institutions play a critical role in shaping the environmental outcomes through their policies, regulation, and actions. So this is like the typical case of common pool resources. If we just leave the common pool resource there will be degradation. We need institutions in that case. We need regulation to boost and to keep or foster the sustainability of the resources. So what is the role of the institutions in environmental degradation? There are different roles, and all of them are actually important in this. One role is the policy formulation. Give me a second that my computer is... Okay, policy formulation and implementation. The institutions are there to evaluate what is happening with the depletion of resources and to design, formulate, and implement policy. That's why I'm going to talk later on policy instruments. So these are the tools that will regulate in some way the markets and foster the sustainability. Then institutions also have the role of enforcement of environmental law. And this could be from the proposing laws or doing, discussions of this law to the enforcement of their compliance. So that's another important things, the regulation of this degradation. Then the resource management and conservation. Institutions in most countries are those in charge of the management and conservation of natural areas, natural reserves, national parks, etc. So they have an important role in keeping them in a good shape, in also making sure they produce the environmental services for the society. In many of these cases, these environmental services are an important source of income for the country. So many countries, and one of my researches in the Galapagos Island, for example, 30% of the country income comes from that place. And all the tourism is based on the marine protected areas and the richness of biodiversity. And it is in the hands of institutions, the national park and different NGOs to do a management plan to enforce the law there and to create conservation strategies. So institutions are key in keeping this. What happened in the past, for example, with places like the National Park of Galapagos? There was no law, there was no monitoring, and the tourism was increasing very, very rapidly. There was no control. Also, people would be hunting tortoises and doing the fishing activities was completely out of control. So the degradation was quite big. If that place wouldn't protect the biodiversity, the main income of this not just these communities, but also 30% of the content would be completely destroyed, because they would destroy the source of income, which was the tourism, which is nature-based tourism. So yes, and then what the government did was put into the institutions the power for the enforcement, the monitoring, and therefore the generation of management plans and conservation strategies. So, and this comes to the next point, which is then research and monitoring, which is also important and is one of the role of the institutions in the environmental degradation. And then we go into a more global area, which is the international cooperation and diplomacy, is other of the roles of the institutions. International cooperation, we have all the agreements. Every year we have a COP, every year we have a biodiversity symposium, an Ocean Decade conference, where we get the agreements in a global way to protect environment. So, and this is done especially with the representation of institutions, governments, NGOs again. Another important role of the institutions are the public awareness and education. In here, it's not just these high-level institutions. In here, we bring institutions such as academic institutions, where education, research is key on this. Research is what we do in research informs all these institutions. So academic institutions are also very important. And they also bring this public awareness. So people can really start to think and change behavior for a more sustainable way. And finally, we have community engagement and participation that can be seen as another important role of the institutions on this. Doesn't matter how many policies the government put, doesn't matter what strategies they use, what a management plan says, if the society is not with it, if there is not a social acceptability of those policies and measures. So we need the community engagement on this and the participation to really get a good environmental conservation policies and reduce the environmental degradation. So that is, institutions then play a key role in shaping environmental governance, policy, and action. And this is not just at local level, but also a national and global level. Local level with the different type of things I mentioned, but also we have all these global activities that shape the the conservation of nature. So in here, then the effectiveness in addressing environmental degradation depends on the capacity to develop and implement proactive and holistic approaches that integrate environmental consideration into broader development agendas and promote the sustainable practices and lifestyles. So yes, now how institutions act towards environmental degradation. So what institutions do towards this environmental degradation? What they do? I mean, I mentioned a lot of things here, but they are the key rules. How they act then towards this environmental degradation. And some answers put here. And please, if you have any other point that you want to bring here, because this is not all. I mean, I'm just putting 3 examples here. Just raise your hand, put it in the chat, and we also discuss that. So one of the ways they act, institutions, is through governance. Through governance in all the aspects of in nature-based solutions, in protecting the environment. Another is through policy instruments, which is the design and implementation of policy instruments. And with policy instruments, we also need all the enforcement, monitoring, to make sure that these instruments are effective and bring what the results they want. And yes, it's the monitoring and enforcement. I said yes there. So before I continue, any question on this part? Is there any question or something you would like to add?
Okay, is there any questions? I cannot see any questions in chat yet. But if you have any questions, you can write down in chat.
Okay.
Or let me translate in bahasa Indonesia. Jika ada pertanyaan, silahkan bisa raise hand, pakai bahasa Indonesia boleh, pakai bahasa Inggris boleh, atau ditulis di chat, ya, kolom chat. Nanti saya bantu untuk translate-kan. Silakan, please. I think everyone clear. No one asked. You can continue, Claudia. Thank you.
I continue. Okay, so we can really talk a lot about environmental degradation institutions here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just choose one topic, which is policy instruments, which is quite relevant from the economic point of view. So I would like to now focus on policy instruments for environmental degradation. So first of all, what are policy instruments? Policy instruments are the tools or mechanisms used by the governments or other institutions to achieve a specific policy objective. In this case, would be environmental conservation, reduction of pollution, for example. So the policy instrument is designed to influence behavior, allocate resources, and regulate activities in order to address societal challenges or promote a desired outcome. So we want this to create incentives, basically. Incentives that will change behavior, that will allow efficient allocation of resources. And so obtain what we want. What we want could be a reduction of pollution. It could be the conservation of a certain species. So what type of policy instruments we have? The typical classification of policy instrument, we have two types. One is the price market-based, and the other is called command and control. So, but the markets always involve price and quantities. So quantitative instruments may be optimal in some situations, but in other situations, we have that command and control can be also the most relevant. So in here we have standards, emission targets, permits, and I want to bring you a bit of the different type of classification of policy instruments institutions have to act when we are facing environmental degradation. What is the main purpose of the policy instruments? The main purpose is to correct the market. Generally, these are needed because of the presence of externalities. And environmental degradation generally is a consequence of externalities we get in the economy. So, so I assume all of you knows what an externality is, but if not, just as a reminder, an externality is when the production or consumption decisions of one agent have an impact on the utility or profit of another agent in an unintended way, and when no compensation or payment is made by the generation of the impact to the affected party. So the externalities is all the external effect of the economic activities on other agents. For example, one of you was talking about mining. Mining is an activity that brings a benefit for a company, let's say, but produce a lot of environmental impacts. That environmental impact is what creates environmental degradation we were talking, and those are externalities, which are affecting to third parties. So what we have to do then, or what institutions do, is those externalities create an inefficient market. So there is inefficiency in the market because the price and quantities will not show the real price and quantity, because these effects are not internalized by the company. So what happens there? We need regulation here. We need institutions to bring policy instruments that will allow this externality to be internalized by this company in order to protect the environment, to either reduce the activity, to reduce the impact, or to generate compensation measures. The type of externalities we talk when we refer to environmental degradation is mostly negative externalities, which is when the action of one party imposes a cost to another party, or when the impact on the bystander is adverse. And environmental degradation is this type of externality, which I already showed you. Could be all things such as air pollution, congestions, water pollution. Here we have even the energy generation, which with large dams, which is also damage in the landscape. So yes, all of these are externalities that produce environmental degradation. So some things to consider. And now I would like you to think this part, let's just think mostly on air pollution, okay? This applies to everything, but just to make the lecture easier to understand in terms of policy instrument, let's think about air pollution and emission levels, emissions. So two things to consider: emission levels and abatement cost, which is the cost to abate or reduce the emissions. So that's why I put a lot of the emissions, air pollution there. So consider a firm that sells its outputs in a competitive market. So the firm will emit pollutants and damage air quality, so environmental degradation. And the firm can reduce emissions, but to reduce emissions, it will have a cost, which is that abatement cost. So, okay, I'm not gonna put you to draw now. We will do it in a second. So assume that the firm has already chosen a profit maximizing output level, and the decisions and emissions decisions are independent. So we will have two things here: a marginal damage of pollution and a marginal cost of abatement, basically. Let's try to do a graph this. We have on the x-axis the emissions, and on the y, the cost per emission, per unit of emission. So if you have an activity that releases emissions, so how are the damage? The more you pollute, the more expensive is for the environment. So this is what you have: a damage curve that the more you emit, the more costly is those emissions for the environment. So, and then the other part is the abatement cost. So if we want to reduce these emissions, for the firm, it will have a cost. If you reduce nothing, so if you as a company, if you have no regulation where you are going to stay, you will be in this E. I don't know if you can see. Give me a second, annotate. Let me see if I can. Yes. If you have no, you will be in here. In here. But if you have regulation, you have to reduce emissions. And reducing emission has a cost. The more you reduce, which is the more you move to this part, the more costly will be for the firm. So you will have something, oops. Like this. Something like this, where, and this is the abatement curve. So we have the marginal abatement cost there. So what is the economically efficient pollution level? Sometimes you may think that, oh, we should go for zero pollution. And well, we don't have much time for a discussion in this, but zero pollution is not the most efficient economically. Why? Because with zero pollution, you will have basically, if you are in zero pollution here, you will not produce anything. So you will have no production, no goods, basically. So what you need to find is the efficient point where the marginal damage is equal to the marginal cost. So basically, the marginal benefit of abating is equal to the marginal damage, which is this point, the intersection in here. Why? Because if we are in any point to the right, so to this part, the damage, the marginal damage is larger than that marginal cost. So we will be, so basically, sorry, the cost to the environment is higher than the benefit it brings. So we will be reducing. And the opposite happens on this side. Okay, so we have then this is the efficient pollution level. So yes, you can see here that zero emission is not an optimal point. So we need to find this efficient point. So let me annotate. Okay, give me a second. Okay. Oh, now I don't know how to get rid of this. So, okay, give me a second to see how I get rid of this first time.
Okay. Yeah, that one. You can click the erasers.
So, how can we encourage then the firm to reduce this emission to the efficient level? Because if we don't have, as I say, if we don't have any regulation, we will be in the maximum amount, and where the margin of damage is much higher. So we do it through policy instruments. And how can, what type of policy instrument? Then we have emission standards, emissions fee or taxes. We can have also transferable emissions permits. And this is mainly the type of policy instruments that we use for air pollution. But there is, and you will find different tables of and classification of policy instruments. And this is what institutions are based for dealing with environmental degradation. So we have, I'm following here the classification from Sterner and Claudia on policy instruments. So we have 4 types in their classification. One is using markets, the other is creating markets, the other type is environmental regulation, and engaging the public. So with using markets, institutions will have these different types of policy instruments: subsidies, taxes or charges, and deposit refund schemes, or targeted subsidies that can be used there. For creating markets types of policy instruments, we have property rights, decentralization, tradable permits, international offset system. We have, for example, catch permits as well, emission permits. For environmental regulation, when we talk about regulation in economic policy instruments, we mean standards. Standards, when you say like, okay, we will produce maximum, a firm can only emit a certain amount of gases. Bans, for example, in fisheries, you can, during this time, you cannot use a certain type of fishing gear. Permits and quotas. So you need a permit to use your vessel, or you can fish only a certain amount of tons per month. Zoning and liability. This is a lot now discussed in the Pacific, where institutions are establishing non-taking zones, so areas that are protected and no one can go and fish in there. So other types of policy instruments and institutions use for environmental degradation is public participation, information disclosure, and labeling. Labeling is very easy. If you guys, just wherever you are sitting now, just take any kind of of anything you have around you. If you have something eating, let me just let me see what I have around here. Yeah, I have this juice and labeling. The label that is vegan, the label that is recycle, that I can recycle it. So what else? Labels that says that something is done with recycling materials. So we have you can see in everything labeling as a policy instrument. And this is type of things that, so you see, I mean, institutions and policy instruments are everywhere. So, for example, okay, let's talk a bit about the deposit refund schemes. And this is an example that we have here in Herriot. For the decade of ocean and to reduce the plastic. And this, in this case, is a mix of action from educational or academic institutions with the national government initiative, okay? So you can see different institutions joining in policies instrument for one for the same objective, which is reduction of plastics to protect the environment or avoid environmental degradation. So in the university here in Herriot, you find these machines. So whatever you buy in the shops that is plastic bottles, you can just keep the bottles, go to the machine, you insert the bottle in there, and the machine will give you a bonus. It will give you around 10 cents per pound per bottle. So you can put them there, and you will have this type of voucher that you can then use in the shops in the university. And those bottles are then recycled. And you have, as you can see here, you have two types of voucher. One voucher would be that money you can use, and another voucher is that you can donate whatever money you get from those bottles to a institution, a certain institution or a charity, etc. So it's very easy to use, and again, this is established. They put here all the examples, and these are pictures I have taken from the machine, actually. Okay, so not some policy instrument that I didn't include, or the authors didn't include in that table, are the direct provision of environmental services, such as waste disposal, parks as well, international agreements, which are really important. We see the COP every year, the ocean decades every year, certification, which is a lot used nowadays, especially when you want to export some goods and services, goods mainly, and the macro policy, so the fiscal, monetary, trade policy, which affect the whole economy and not just environment. So these are also a policy instrument linked to institutions to avoid environmental degradation. So the question is, how can the inefficiency results from an externality be remedied? How we then can reduce this environmental degradation, which is basically coming from the externalities and is making our economic system inefficient. So this is basically encouraging the firm to produce less in some way. But how we do that? We could, for example, use an output tax. And this is just one case, okay? We can have a lot of others, different policy instruments, but that is a full course actually. The classical market-based policy instrument for environmental regulation is a Pigouvian tax. For the Pigouvian taxes, the regulator sets a tax per unit produced, which is equal to the marginal environmental damage. So if you remember the previous graph where we had the damage and then the abatement curve, the point, give me a second. Okay, now it's, as it says there, is the point in which we equal the tax to the environmental damage. So we know that this E is the optimal emission level. So, and this is the point. So here is where the tax is gonna be. So let me just change again. Okay, so that is the point where we should set a tax to make it efficient from the economic point of view. So if you have had in your microeconomics course if you have seen the externality analysis, you will see that in terms of externalities, this is the the private cost, and this is the demand curve. So this is the point where the economy is. But because we have externality, for example, emissions, the social cost is different to the private cost and is higher. And then we don't, the economy is not anymore in this equilibrium, but the economy now is in this one if we want to consider the environmental damage. So the quantity should be lower and the price should be higher to really account for the negative externality or for the environmental degradation. So what happens here as institutions will need to correct the market. So what they do then? What they can do is use one of these policy instruments, and the one I was saying before, the tax. So, and how the tax should be the same value of the damage produced or the environmental degradation. So if we want the institutions, how they can act on this is through policy instrument setting a tax. The tax should be, we can do it mathematically, but it's not something that I'm gonna prove at this moment. The tax should be the same size of the environmental externality or the environmental degradation, which is basically this size you have here in terms of emissions. And so if we do that, if we set that tax, the price will be higher because now we are internalizing the externality and the quantity will be lower. And then we are bringing the economy to equilibrium. So let me delete this again. So how to correct the previous externality? Internalizing an externality involves altering incentives so that people account for external effects, and is with the tax. This purple point here is the tax line, is the tax. So we go now to resource evaluation of policy. How the institutions then design the tax. And this is very complicated. So what the amount of reduction in emission can be justified by the benefit of slowing or preventing global warming? So are the ecological and recreational benefit of removing a dam greater than the cost? How to measure the value and cost of non-market services? We are talking about here about about environmental externality. Environmental goods that they don't have a value. Some of them they will. For example, fish. You know the cost of fish in the market, so it would be easier to calculate, the value of an externality. But when we talk about air pollution, for example, what is the value of the clean air? And if an institution, the government, ministry, wants to set or design a policy instrument to reduce this air pollution and avoid environmental degradation, they need to know the size and the value of that damage. How we can say is the value of the damage of air pollution? So here is when we will need environmental valuation techniques. So which allow us to calculate the value society places on environmental goods and services and account for all these non-market goods and services that we can then take in cost-benefit analysis. So the same happens with climate change, how we measure the loss from climate change. So again, what I was saying, environmental degradation comes from the economic activities, but also indirectly by the effects of climate change. So, but how can we actually calculate that? Because market not always provided direct information regarding the value that society places on changes in the provision of environmental goods and services. So we need to look at the opportunity cost of that. When we have the market, it is easy. We have the market, it is easy, we have the price. But when we don't have the market, we don't. So, so questions such as what is the value of these ecosystem services? How we value the ecosystem services? How we establish the price of them? And we need it because that price is what we need to design the tax. And if the tax is not well designed, if you remember, the economy will not be or work efficiently. So that's why this is important. And if it doesn't work efficiently, we won't get the reduction in emissions we want. And there will be a dead weight loss for society. So one of the tools institutions have to kind of come to approach on this is the use of reveal or stated preference methodologies to value this degradation. And reveal preferences calculate the use values. Is a direct method, and techniques such as travel cost or hedonic prices are the techniques used in this. And for stated preferences, we have other types of techniques such as contingent valuation, choice experiments, called. I just want you to know this. I'm not gonna really explain the valuation techniques, but at least you know that some techniques are there and they are used to calculate values of non-market goods. For the stated preferences is indirect method where we calculate willingness to pay or willingness to accept for non-market goods. And the main motivation of using these environmental evaluation techniques is because it enables environmental impacts to be included in the cost-benefit analysis and environmental assessment. It allows us to design this policy instrument, for example, to give the value of this tax we need to reduce emissions, to design compensation schemes or subsidies in some cases to compensate people in the mining example, so to compensate people who have been impacted by the mining, and also to introduce these values in national accounting, especially to know how much has been the environmental degradation for different countries. So, and I'm gonna stop here. So we have still some minutes for questions and so on.
Okay, thank you, Claudia. I think we have several questions here.
Okay. Let me.
Several. Okay, in the chat. Do you want
Yes.
to read it or let me read it for you?
I can read them. So
Okay.
here we have one. I have questions about just like that mentioned 8 points about the role of institution. I'm still confused about research and monitoring. In certain developing countries, mostly research and monitoring taken by third parties, not officials from sometimes as won't be impactful for addressing the issue. How to make research communication effective. Okay, yes, research many times are taken by third parties. Still, those third parties are institutions, generally academic institutions or NGOs that performs research. The monitoring is also taken by institutions. I mean, it's third parties, but these third parties are still institutions. So the role is still there. Then the question says, results of environmental research is neglected by official. That then comes to the challenges that this institutional policy instruments brings here. And these challenges, one of the most important challenges in here is the political environment. Many times we can have effective designs, we can have good policies, but all of these end up into and laws also. More than the policies, the law, the design of law and implementation of law, they have to pass political agreements. And that is the point where many of these fail. And that is a discussion that is out of the economic environment, but is one of the barriers. And yes, it's totally fine. How then to make research communication effective and efficiently? For that one, we need more engagement. I just gave actually a talk yesterday about policy and public engagement. A lot of academic institutions and other types of institutions do research just to produce papers. We need engagement between academics and policymakers, between academics and other types of institutions, social economics institutions, to do practice-based research. So basically that to use the results of research into practice, to inform in a more effective way practice. And this only can be done with real engagement. So it says, based on last point mentioned, it is complex and broad to make society and community engaged, especially in communities with low awareness of environmental issues. Okay, yes, that's true. So what happens to increase engagement, and this is something that many countries have increased really, is the policies focus on education. And this is something that I mentioned in the role of institutions. The education is important. We need the people and education. I'm not talking about university education, I'm talking from people from the early stage, from school. Schools need to educate people on environmental conservation, on the awareness of the climate change and all these things. So yes, it's environmental education that's and also events. At least some countries have been introducing events to make awareness of people of the conditions of the environment, policies that will be implemented, etc. So yes, that's a totally valid and good point. There are several initiatives to fill the gap, but several people or even officials are businessmen still ignorant. Can you give an example of what is the best effective way to engage awareness? Perhaps it could be Okay, yes. If I can give an example, I would say again, the engagement from early stage to research. We just finished a project 2 months ago in which we made a big contribution to reduction of air pollution in Bogota. We worked directly with the ministry, and we engaged them from the beginning to work together. And after we finished the project, the ministry implemented exactly what we told them would be effective for reduction of emissions, which was paving roads. Generally, instead, what would do the policy would just reduce emissions through transport or industry. That's what has been done for years historically in Colombia, and I'm sure this is the case for many other countries. But our research, the result gave that, guys, I mean, that's fine, but you're missing the key point, which is paving roads, producing a lot of particulate matters. But because we work with them from the beginning and we built that trust between the institution, ministries, policymakers, and our research, they actually took it and they put 600,000, a million, about $1 million of US dollars for paving roads in Bogota, in the city. So yes, there are barriers, but this is an example, as you were asking, of a good practice that was effective. What else we have here about the graph of economically efficient pollution level? Why the expenditure to pay negative impact make a curve? Okay, the curve can go from the 0 or can come. I mean, it doesn't matter really. The important thing is that the curve is increasing. So it could come from the 0 point, totally fine. It could have a 0 damage from the beginning, or it can be a convex one. It all depends which type of damage, and that is based basically on meteorological conditions, which could change from place to place. So yeah, I mean, the core, as long as it is positive or growing, doesn't matter if it starts from 0 or it could start from another point. What action could make the curve before the line increase exponentially? It a lot depends of the type of pollutant. So in here the shape of that curve really depends of the pollutant behavior, basically. Particulate matters and generally is they go in that way. CO2 is a bit slower, so yes, it depends on that. In environmental evaluation cost approach, why there is no calculation from logistic activities related to manufacturing, goods consumption, or shipping? Because those are economic costs that you can financially easily calculate. So it is not a non-market good. So they are a market good. So those costs are introduced directly. So you don't need to do evaluation or include them in evaluation. You have it from existing data. Or you can calculate it easily from real costs in the market. Okay, I hope I answered those questions to you. If you have any further question, just shout.
Yeah. Thank you, Claudia. If you have any further questions, Naufal, just like confirmations and so on, you can also open your microphone. And others, I also, what is that? Um, provide translation services for the students from regular program. If you want to use in bahasa Indonesia, don't worry. Jadi let me translate in bahasa Indonesia. Teman-teman jika ada yang mau bertanya pakai bahasa Indonesia diperbolehkan ya karena teman-teman banyak yang dari reguler tapi akan menarik jika kalian juga belajar pakai bahasa Inggris kan gitu. Okay. So, is there any? It's very interesting questions from Naufal. Thank you, Naufal. Okay, others? Do you have any questions, others? Hopefully all of you are not sleepy because I know last in the early morning was a very if Indonesian people is very might be a little bit sleep like a little bit late night because of Indonesians football match. Football match hitting with the versus with the South Korea, which is actually our football coach is came from South Korea, so it's really like a proudness.
Who won?
Yes, we won finally 11 versus 10.
Excellent, excellent. Congratulations.
Yes, hopefully we can go to Paris for Olympiad.
Yes,
Okay, I
yes.
see now. Noval is raising hands. Please, Noval, you can open the microphone. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I also remember when you explained about environmental valuation cost approach, and it based from, for example, the pollution produced or the pollution that's already there. But how we can uh, differ differ from a pollution, or maybe the loss that is from process, or the loss that is from the result. To both of them combine into one, maybe paradigm or formula, or maybe it completely different calculation or the formula. Thank you, man.
Okay, sorry. I missed you said air pollution, and what was the other you mentioned?
Oh, sorry. Am I audible? Because here this is there is thunderstorm here, so I'm afraid that I'm not audible.
Yeah, I'm
Hello.
struggling a bit to hear you. So
Okay. Yeah, okay. Let me repeat again. So when you explain about environmental valuation of storage, how they distinct or differ from maybe, for example, pollution that is produced and pollution that is already in
now,
having earth.
I think
Noval,
I think
yeah,
that
we missed your voice.
it's
Okay.
probably best if you can write your question
Yes,
because
ma'am.
I'm really struggling to hear you.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm
might
sorry.
be a little bit, yeah, the voice distractions surrounding it because me also cannot hear clearly. Sorry, Noval.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit the assessment of environmental impact, something like that. I'm just guessing
Yeah.
on his questions. Ah, stormy. Well, just because in my city there's storm right now. Okay, hopefully you're right. Oh, because in Yogyakarta we have a cloudy also in surrounding my house.
Okay. I hope it's only sunny when I go there.
Oh, yeah, lovely shiny. Yeah, shiny and great to have city tour, sidewalks surrounding the paddy field, hopefully. Okay, let's wait of
Well,
Naufal.
yeah, I think it was something about the different types of impact and how to put them together. I mean, if it is that one, I see what comes in the chat. But if it is how to value different types of impact, there are two ways to do that. Either separate and then add them, because the good thing of environmental evaluation is that we bring everything to a common currency, which is money. So we can do it separately through valuing in in separate scenarios. So it's environmental evaluation is basically based on scenarios. So presenting different scenarios and valuing them separately, and then we just add them. And so it's just an addition, 1 plus 2. Or another way to do it is to build scenarios where we put both or several impacts that could be from different nature all together, and we get one value. The drawback of doing that in that way is that we cannot separate. We don't know what is the share of that value for each of the impacts, or each of the different types of pollution. We just have the aggregate value, unless we apply a choice experiment. If we apply a choice experiment where we use as attributes the different types of value, then we will have the marginal value of each degradation or each impact, which we can later on just simply add, and to have a total value of the degradation from different types of impacts or degradation sources.
Okay, hopefully it can answer Naufal's questions. Yeah, valuing. Mostly for my research works, I'm using the scenario and also asking to the society surrounding it. +2 +1. Okay, hopefully Naufal, can you, yeah? Or others, if you have any questions, you can raise the hands or directly open the microphone. I saw several of students from a regular program. Okay, others? Do you have any further questions? Well, I think everyone is silent hopefully means that they got it, Claudia. They can understand it, hopefully. But nevertheless, I'm really excited to have you nearly in the next month, I think, to have you in here and meeting you here. And you will also meeting with them directly offline to have the class in the green economics. Thank you so much, Claudia. If it is possible, would you mind to send the PPT for us through email so I can share to the students?
Sure, I will do that.
Okay, thank you so much, Claudia. Today, I think it's already like 1 hours 45 minutes for you to talk. I know that you're really exhausted afterwards. So
now I am jumping to another meeting with Indonesia. So yes, they just started. Yeah.
Oh, okay,
So,
okay, sorry. They
no,
already
no worries.
started. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so
So
much, Claudia. Yeah,
thank you very much, and well, looking forward to seeing you all in next month.
in the next months. Thank you, Claudia. Bye bye. Keep healthy.
Same, same. Have a good weekend.
Have a
Bye.
lovely weekend. Bye bye. Thank you to you. No foul.